Can we start?
Yeah, Mr. Serge, you can start.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this session being organized by the FAO Regional Office for the Near East and North Africa to discuss one of the most critical issues facing not only Iraq, but the entire region. It is generally accepted that water scarcity and the way water is planned, allocated, and managed has much broader impacts beyond the water sector itself. Direct and indirect impacts on the various dimensions of sustainable development have been demonstrated in various reports, making water a key driver for achieving many of the SDGs. The Arab region is home to more than 5% of the global population, yet it contains less than 1% of the global water availability. This is reflected in the fact that the region is one of the major importers of food worldwide. In fact, the region imported 37 million tons of wheat in 2019, costing nearly $9.5 billion. Or in water terms, the region imported more than 55 billion cubic meters of virtual water embedded within the imported wheat. Actually, many countries of the region have retreated from the aspiration to achieve food self-sufficiency due to limited water availability, and have therefore adopted more balanced policies that incorporate trade as a major element of food security. Yet agriculture remains a central sector in many countries of the region, contributing to employment, food production, and rural stability, among other factors. The general impression that agriculture is not a water-efficient sector will eventually lead to less water allocation to agriculture, as well as increasing pressure for higher water use efficiency and water productivity. Although many organizations have and are working to support the region face the water challenges, we at FAO came to the conclusion that the scale and nature of water scarcity in the region requires a holistic, collaborative framework and platform to facilitate the development of coherent visions and establish synergies among the development partners working on water. The Regional Initiative on Water Scarcity was launched in 2013, and we are pleased to see increased coordination and collaboration levels amongst all the partners. For countries to make the difficult decisions on water allocation to achieve inclusive and sustainable development, FAO and our partners are working on enhancing the national capacities on the tools and approaches that inform the decision-making processes. In this regard, water accounting, water productivity, cross-sector coordination are example areas of our water program at FAO. Within a collaborative mindset, our work on cross-sectoral coordination has facilitated the first joint ministerial meeting of the water and agriculture ministers within the region and of both the ministers of water and agriculture, as well as the establishment of a joint high-level committee in this regard. I take this opportunity to acknowledge the leading role of the League of Arab States and its affiliated organizations in advancing this collaborative approach on water and agriculture, which is also guided by the adopted regional strategies. While elevated population growth rates and changing lifestyle is rapidly increasing the demand for water, impacts of climate change on precipitation is leading to more extreme events in the form of floods and extended droughts, thus affecting water supply. Many reports conclude that water will be on the spotlight as an impediment to sustainable development for the foreseeable future. In fact, the World Bank is estimating that unless serious actions are taken, the Arab region faces economic losses of 6 to 14% of regional gross domestic product by 2050 due to climate change-induced water scarcity. With heavy reliance on external water resources, Iraq has an additional complexity layer that requires not only technical knowledge and capacity on integrated water management, but also effective hydro diplomacy capacities to facilitate reaching fair and equitable water allocation agreements with riparian countries. Shared water resources needs and agreements should be viewed as a catalyst for cooperation and not a source of conflict, as perceived by some. We at FAO are ready to provide our technical expertise to help Iraq manage its water resources in an integrated and sustainable manner, thus contributing to achieving inclusive and sustainable development for the Iraqi people. Once again, I welcome all of you to this session and look forward to your interactions with our distinguished presenters and panelists. Thank you. Hello. May we continue by assigning Mr. Mohammed Al-Hamdi as co-host? Is that possible?
Thank you, Serge. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Serge, for the opening. And I would like to welcome all participants to this session entitled the Strategic Planning of Water Resources Allocation. Can you give me the chance to share my screen so that I go through the program quickly?
I believe you're co-host, so you should be able to do that.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
So the session today will be divided into two parts. After Mr. Serge Nkosi has opened the session, we will have a number of presentations by colleagues from FAO and partner organizations. After the four presentations, we will have a chance for discussion. And here I kindly ask the organizers to also allow those who raise their hands to also put their questions forward, since the chat option is disabled. After the first part of the session, where we have the presentations, we will have the second part of the session, which will go for around 1 hour. And I will hand over the moderation to my colleague, Jean-Marc Forest, to moderate the panel discussion, where we also have a number of experts on water management. Before ending the session, we will also show a short documentary video on the MEDED project. With this introduction on the program, I would like to invite the speakers, the presenters, and here let me introduce Mr. Pasquale Statuto, who will be the first presenter in this session. Mr. Statuto has been working for more than 25 years on agricultural water use efficiency and water productivity. He is the author and co-author of more than 100 publications in scientific journals and books. In 2003, he joined FAO as Chief of the Water Resources Development and Management Services. He was the UN Water Chairman between 2007 and 2009, and have served as a member of several international committees and boards. From 2014 to 2018, he was the FAO Regional Program Leader and Delivery Manager of the Regional Water Scarcity Initiative for the Near East and North Africa. He is presently Independent Senior Water Advisor for FAO and other international organizations. The title of his presentation is Strategic Planning of Water Resources Allocation. Mr. Pasquale, the floor is yours, and I ask the organizers to allow Mr. Pasquale to unmute him.
Thank you very much. Can everybody listen? My voice?
Yes.
You can see, okay. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and particularly I would like to give you everybody the good morning and welcome. And simply in my presentation, I will briefly highlight some key principles and modalities of some relevance when we are addressing the strategic planning of water resources allocation. We all know the role that water plays in the various sectors of the society, from the drinking to sanitation of the urban sector, the irrigation in agriculture, the production of hydroelectric energy in industry, and not least the sustainability of nature, among others. There are also other functions that water plays. We all know about this. We call multi-purpose or multifunctionality of water. Unfortunately, the point is that over time, water demand is on the rise, which means population growth, the land use change, development in general requires more and more water. On the other side, water supply is on decline. Over the same time, we have that now the climate change, we will hear more about that, the variability and its extreme events, the depletion of large groundwater reserve, and the degradation of water quality, they are all playing against the supply of water, which is continuously declining. So all of this provides a divergence between supply and demand of water over time that is accelerating and escalating the water scarcity. And this imposes huge sustainability challenges. All demands cannot be satisfied without overpassing sustainable limits of withdrawal, consumption, pollution. And the point is that the competition between sectors builds up, and government need to make harder decisions about allocating water resources. And here is where the strategic planning of water allocation comes into play as an instrument to address the different elements that are implied or are involved when we have to deal with an allocation. The strategy here is intended as a criteria, an action program to support the achievement of a country political economy, and the planning is in fact to find an optimal solution of a problem having multiple objectives, many of which are conflicting, accounting for trade-offs, gains and losses, inequality to address, risk that we are going to face, uncertainty, and prioritization. So essentially, particularly in water scarce country, an optimal water resource allocation strategy is a major determinant of a viable economy, an equitable society, and a functioning and resilient ecosystem. We have also to consider that beyond allocation between sectors, there is also an allocation strategy within each sector. And here I would like to highlight some of those steps involved in the strategic planning, a sort of simple framework that allow us to put order in our thinking and in our process of strategic planning of allocation of water resources. A first step is clear to set a time horizon. We have seen also for the SDG, the time horizon was 2030. We can go to 2050, depending on the, let's say, the way we are looking at our future in the planning. We have to set this time horizon. Generally, the 20-year time frame is one that has been used frequently, which seems a good compromise not to be too far away to address several uncertainty and not too short in order to have a limited, let's say, influence in the direction of the country choices. Once a time horizon has been set, the second important step is to elaborate a plausible scenarios, several plausible scenarios of development. And we know that we can have economy and social economy, political economy that are based mostly, can be based mostly in agriculture, on in green economy, on in industry, tourism, or even on service. Generally speaking, even if sometimes one of those major economy may dominate, the real scenario is a combination of several aspects. But building the scenario is an important step of the strategic planning because it sets the vision for the future of what is the political economy that the country is looking at as a development. However, one thing we need to highlight is that generally there is the consideration that no other activity uses as much water per unit surface area of land and generate as little return per cubic meter of water as agriculture. In other words, economic returns to agriculture are relatively poor when compared to other sectors. And therefore, the dominant economic rationale would generally reduce water to agriculture in favor of other higher return sector. However, we have observed that even in water scarce country, there has been even an expansion of water or a sustained continuous water allocation of water to agriculture, mostly driven by food self-sufficiency policy, rather than enhancing the import of food. So that would appear like a rational decision. But of course, there are reasons why an irrational behavior is implemented. And this is simply because there are assumptions behind the economic rationale that are questionable. Here, I will report just a few of them. For instance, the first assumption is that there will be sufficient surplus of food on the world market on short and long term to meet the various demands. And this is neglecting or disregarding the fact that we are having a much more climate variable, extreme event, and the climate change might completely, let's say, disrupt this assumption. The second one is that the world food price remains stable to some affordable level. This has been completely invalidated during the food crisis of 2008 to 2009, when the food price were spiking up and some exporting countries were even banning the export of their staple food. Third one is that the political environment of the international countries will maintain stability within the MENA country, in the specific case of our region. This, unfortunately, is evident and under the eyes of everybody that this international political environment is not playing in favor of the stability, at least not yet. So those are what are impeding sometimes to have just an economic rationale. So we need to consider that agriculture has several other returns in social and political terms that need to be evaluated as a net benefit. Among them, there is the rural development, the employment opportunities, the landscape maintenance, the food security enhancement we just mentioned, the biodiversity protection, and the conservation of cultural heritage. So during the building of this plausible scenario of development, we needed to have a clear understanding of the overall country political economy, and the net benefit evaluation has to be clear of the individual sector demanding water. In other terms, we needed to know and to evaluate a comprehensive return in order to allocate water to obtain the most beneficial results, or what we would call optimal solution. So some key principles for the building of the scenario and for the overall water allocation process are: one, the participation and engagement of all stakeholders that is required in order to define a shared vision about development and water. The participation is relevant to sort out the conflicting interests, balance centralized, decentralized governance, and have a proper valuation of ecosystem services and non-monetary dimension or impact. Then it's important to have a multidisciplinary approach, because there is a high risk of spillover impact when planning in the policy of each sector independently. So there is a need to look at the nexus investigation, has been already highlighted. This is very important, so the multidisciplinary approach. But also very important is the need of a reliable water accounting system in order to have quantitative information on status and trends of all water resources uses, demand, access, and distribution, both conventional and non-conventional, including, of course, the quality of the water. So once the scenario has been, or more than one scenario has been developed, we need to identify the alternative pathways to reach that expected specific scenario, accounting also for their water dependency. Essentially, whatever is the vision for the development, and there are different paths to reach the same results. And each path might have different water demand, different water dependency. One simple example remaining in the case of food, let's say increasing the food self-sufficiency rate can be obtained either increasing the productivity of the same land, or an expansion of the land, or a combination of the two. So the different pathway will generate different water dependency. Then, of course, we needed to carry out what is the analytical assessment of this trade-off, the cost-benefit we were mentioning, for pathways that possibly circumvent as much as possible such a dependency on water. We need always to consider that population growth is the strongest driver for water demand. Irrigated agriculture is still remain the larger consumer of water, and climate change and extreme events will introduce additional uncertainty and risks. In addition, there are risks that we were never expecting, like the pandemic of COVID. Some key options to circumvent water dependency are already known. Some are based on the use of non-conventional water, wastewater, desalinized water, reorient agriculture toward less consumptive crops, diversify the economy toward less water-intensive activity, food trade that accounts for virtual water import and export, increased agriculture water productivity, have an efficient food value chain, and possibly adopt sustainable diet, which is low footprint consumption habit. So the last step then is to ensure that the selected paths are within the safe operational boundaries of water consumption and renewability. Essentially, with increasing demand over time, a country should identify a cap that should not be overpassed in order to be sustainable. Otherwise, the continuous depletion will lead to a crisis. Similarly, the percentage withdrawal of the renewable water resources should be within sustainable limit. Generally, is recommended around 40%, going toward higher and higher percentage of withdrawal put the country at a high risk of drought and crisis in case of particular need. So in closing, I would like to summarize by saying that strategic planning and allocation of water resources is a dynamic, iterative process. It needs periodical update with adaptation to new information, new objective, and update forecast of future demand, cost benefit, and their equitable distribution. The strategic planning needs to recognize the full spectrum of costs and benefits, economic, social, environmental, and cultural, among others, their equitable distribution, the engagement of all stakeholders, and the participation in defining a shared vision about water and development and provide transparency. The nexus between sectors call for coherent policies, and water should be allocated and managed always according to ecological, sustainable principle. Never forget that water accounting is a requirement for strategic planning. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pasquale, for giving us this food for thought, this overarching presentation, which puts water allocation and sustainability in perspective. Now I move to our second speaker, Ms. Carol Shoshani Sherfain. Ms. Sherfain is the Chief of Water Resources in the Climate Change and Natural Resources Sustainability Cluster at UN ESCWA in Beirut. Her work focuses on climate mainstreaming, transboundary waters, and the Sustainable Development Goals. She also coordinates the regional initiative for the assessment of climate change impacts on water resources and socioeconomic vulnerability in the Arab region, known as the RECAR initiative. RECAR is being implemented with regional and global partners under auspices of the Arab Ministerial Water Council and through the Arab Center for Climate Change Policies based in ESCWA. We're happy, pleased to have you, Carol, with us, and the floor is yours, please. Can the organizers unmute Ms. Sherfain? Can the organizers please unmute Ms. Carol Sherfain?
All right, there you go. Thank you.
We hear you. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you, FAO, Mohammed, my colleague Sarah, for this kind invitation to join your session. We've been working together for some time on water, agriculture, and climate change in the region, and I'm very pleased to follow my colleague Pasquale, because as he referenced strategic planning, we need to think about ways to inform strategic planning through climate change assessments, and also think about means of implementation that are made possible through finance. So I'm hitting a couple things here that can help our conversation move forward before we enter into more case studies later in the session. There we go. So I'm first speaking about a regional initiative for the assessment of climate change impacts on water resources and socioeconomic vulnerability in the Arab region. It's called RECAR. It's a United Nations League of Arab States initiative supported by the Swedish government, the Germans, and a dozen UN and international partners. We've been working for about a decade under the auspices of the Arab Ministerial Water Council to better understand what climate means for water resources, because really before 2009, we didn't have any tools to assess what climate change means for water resources and water dependent sectors. So we developed a regional initiative collaboratively that establishes a methodology for assessing climate change impacts and vulnerability, and has been matched with the establishment of a regional knowledge hub, capacity building, and various programs that have been informing adaptation, mitigation, and negotiations in the region. But why do we need to do this? Well, as you can see from this graphic, the global assessments on climate change divide the Arab region into 6 boundaries. You can see even when we think about Iraq, it's divided up into 4 different parts, so that the analysis there makes it very difficult to provide the climate science to inform planning on climate change impacts on water resources. So therefore, we worked collaboratively to have a regional Arab domain established. It's called a MENA domain within the context of the international community's work on regional climate downscaling called CORDEX. And by establishing this domain, we were able to have a framework for collaboration and understanding on what climate change means across the Arab region. And to do this, we developed regional climate modeling outputs at a 50-kilometer scale across the region, looking at 2 climate scenarios. And some of you may have already heard about this, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, there are 2, well, there are various scenarios, but when we think about a high emission business as usual scenario, we talk about RCP 8.5. So RCP means radiative forcings. And that means that from now, where you see the circle in yellow, if we don't do mitigation options by the end of the century, the radiative forcings will be quite high by the end of the century. Otherwise, if there are mitigation options put in place, we can mitigate, we can reduce those impacts, and then we have this RCP 4.5. So when you look at the scenarios, really you have to think about how climate affects water, depending on how you also perceive changes in mitigation patterns to happen in the future. So what does this mean specifically? Well, as you can see in the yellow, if there are mitigation actions being established, being pursued globally, and we've all heard about this race to zero by mid-century and various targets by various developed countries, well, from the north looking forward to how to reduce their emissions. But as you can see, from our reference scenario at the beginning of the century, if there are positive mitigation options, by mid-century, our region will go up in terms of temperature by about 2 degrees on average. By end of century, it would go up maybe about 3. If there are no mitigation actions and we work on a business as usual scale, and please don't think that the COVID situation of the last year made a difference. Unfortunately, we have found that that in December 2020, emissions, GHG emissions were 2% higher than the prior December in 2019. So the COVID has not made the respite that many of us might have thought initially. So the trends are still increasing, and therefore, if there are not aggressive mitigation actions put in place, our region, across the Arab region, under an RCP 8.5 scenario, can have average temperatures reaching an increase of 4 to 5 degrees by the end of this century. Now, this is not the peak temperatures like we see in Iraq or Kuwait of 56 or et cetera during the summer months. We are talking average temperatures increasing, and this has important implications for water. How can we see that? Well, under RICAR, we examined runoff through 2 hydrological models to assess what would be the implications for this for transboundary water basins. And as you can see here, by mid-century, there are some effects about a loss in runoff in some basins, and the one that we are examining largely here in the Tigris and Euphrates basins. You see that there's some reduction. This is direct mitigation, positive scenario where there is action globally. Look what happens on an 8.5. look how much more red it becomes, how much less runoff can be experienced in the basins that we are looking for today. Indeed, it's estimated that Euphrates runoff could reduce from 6 to 13%. Runoff in the Tigris can reduce from 11 to 15%. All this on this 8.5 scenario if we don't think about collectively working on mitigation globally and seeing the implications for the water sector. We also did work on vulnerability. I invite you to look at the Regional Knowledge Hub and its data portal that is hosted by our colleagues at the FAO, and our Regional Knowledge Hub at ricard.org, so you can get more information on these types of findings to help inform your work as you look at strategic planning in the water sector. While we have been working at the Arab regional scale, recently we thought, well, because there's a gap in knowledge, we were now looking at a new set of projections that are coming out right now. Actually, we have the projections, we're now under analysis of generating new projections for the Mashrek domain, which covers very much the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates and the entire Arabian Gulf. And these are coming out by the summer at a 10-kilometer scale. So these really can help with planning and climate proofing investments and plans. They'll be available up to the mid-century and at that higher business as usual scenario, so we can risk-proof our work. So why does this, what implications does this have? Well, when we think about how important water is for a region, and this audience, you're all water advocates, we have to realize that globally, climate finance is still going to mitigation much more than adaptation. So mitigation, while it's very important for us, understandably, so is our need to adapt now to the challenges facing agriculture, facing water-dependent sectors, facing cities and communities because of flash floods. We are facing pressures now, and we need resources for adaptation. However, in the Mashrek region, so Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey, as an analysis, we can see that in the light green, funds are coming largely towards mitigation and not adaptation. We are also seeing that the funds coming over to the region are largely associated with debt instruments, not with grants, even though our countries are largely overcoming crises, having conflicts that are having and continued instability, where grant resources would be much more useful. Indeed, because of this analysis showing how much debt is dominating climate finance in the region, ESCWA is actually working with partners right now to launch, and has launched in December, a climate SDG debt swap initiative to help find ways that debt instruments that can be used to actually translate into grant instruments that can support adaptation measures, particularly in water and agriculture. What else do we see? Well, we see for Iraq specifically that funds are limited. This is showing the amount of climate finance flows to the Mashrek region over the last, since 2013. And we can see that in Iraq, the amount has been limited compared to other countries. For example, Turkey has received a significant share of the climate finance flows in 2016. This data set only extends to 2018. So you can see, however, the implications that this poses in terms of balance to access to resources in the region. To look at that a bit further, we see again that the resources going to Turkey are much oriented towards mitigation. However, in Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon, they tend to be more on adaptation, which is responsive to the needs as well. No funds really are going to Iran and Syria because of the ongoing sanctions, though of course the need there is significant. And I know I'm running out of time, so let me be quick. I also wanted to highlight that when we think about adaptation and mitigation, there's different sectors that this is divided into. So when we look at the funds going towards Turkey, for example, it's largely related to agriculture, forest, and other land uses, not so much water. While in Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon, the resources coming in do tend to go towards the water sector. And we see the distribution over time here on the right-hand side, showing that funds have been tapering off and that water tends to dominate some of the countries in Mashrek with So for climate, there are various instruments there. There are the funds for climate financing for debt. There are also support programs such as the Green Climate Fund Readiness Program, the Climate Technology Center, a network supported by UNEP. These are different instruments that can also help with access to finance to build capacity. Iraq recently actually received in the last couple of years support from the Adaptation Fund and the Green Climate Fund for 2 climate-related projects related to agriculture and national adaptation planning. And this trend is increasing, but there is much more that needs to be done in order to really ready ourselves to address climate phase. So in closing, I just wanted to share with you, take this opportunity to say that a lot of the work now we are doing, because water is so dominant in the region, within the context of the Water Action Decade. This that was launched in 2018 and extends to 2028. The midpoint review globally will happen in March 2023. And our partners, ESCWA, FAO, and several partners in the region have already started preparations regionally to have stories, solutions, challenges for the Arab region shared as part of this global process. In fact, the Joint Ministerial Council for Agriculture and Water mentioned during the opening is part of those landmark events that will help us to have a roadmap forward to this regional preparatory process. In that context, data on SDG 6 is currently available. The global report update on SDG 6 was actually launched on the 6th of March. It is available online. ESCWA is in the process of working with its global partners to have the regional update for the Arab region on SDG 6.1, which is on IWM. The data has already been issued, but we're asking all members of the region to give us stories to have a regional lens through which we can talk about IWM. And that report will be coming out later this year. Stories are invited up until May. Also on transboundary, the regional report on 6.5.2 will be coming out also later this year. And of course, the landmark discussions that happened earlier in this conference would be addressed. And in preparation for the regional review for the Water Action Decade, we highlight that next year, March 2022, is on groundwater. So any stories and solutions that you have to highlight on successes and challenges on groundwater, please reach out to us, because we want to have these stories relayed as part of the regional preparatory process and part of the communications that we will relay to the global process. So with that, I'm just closing to say that climate adaptation and mitigation should be equally financed. When we look forward, that adaptation planning should not only look at one sector, but across sectors, that issues of water and climate security are very much linked to food security and energy security, understandably, that we need to inform with science our way forward, that assessments can help to assess risks, and of course, climate mainstreaming is needed across the development planning process. So thank you very much, and thanks to FAO and our RICAR partners who have also contributed to this effort.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for this very informative presentation. I'm sure that we will have a lot of questions on this. It actually tackles not only the RICAR, but the financing, the adaptation, and also the Water Action Decade. So there is a lot of information there for everyone. We'll move to our next speaker, Mr. Jiro Arayama. Mr. Arayama is our land and water officer at our regional office in FAO. He advises, plans, monitors, and implements water accounting activities for FAO's project in countries of the region, including Iraq, Egypt, Iran, Jordan, Lebanon, and Palestine. So with this, I give the floor to Jiro. So if the organizers could unmute him so that he can present.
Yes, I think I can unmute myself. And yes, so I think you see my screen, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mohammed, for the kind introduction. So For today, I want to introduce you water accounting, which is a water resources management tool. And there are some cases already in the region and in Iraq. So I want to introduce the cases today, right? So for those who are not yet probably familiar with water accounting, I will give you the definition. So it is an assessment of the water status and trends about water resources, supply, demand, distribution, accessibility and use, etc. So I highlighted the important parts in different colors. So I highlighted status and trends because water accounting should cover decently long periods, like 5 years, 10 years, whatever, to capture the trend. It shouldn't be just 1 year or one crop season snapshot. Otherwise, we can't see the trend over the trend of the changes in terms of water resources uses, etc. And there's many components we have to cover in water accounting, like resources, supply, demand. It is because water accounting should be comprehensive, and we have to account the water resources and supply side, the water sources side, and demand and use side, the user side, and also the infrastructure that connects the water source side and user side. So that's what's meant by this definition of water accounting. And some other important components of water accounting include that water accounting has to include stakeholders engagement. It is not just a technical work on data collection and calculation, etc. And also it should have key questions to be answered through the water accounting. And also you have to distinguish in water accounting what different types of water uses, and also you have to account return flows. And FAO is recommending water accounting to be done in several cycles, and you gradually improve the accuracy, relevancy, and the level of confidence of outputs of the water accounting. And as a first cycle of the water accounting, FAO has implemented several projects conducting rapid water accounting. And this is a water accounting that is done with available data and resources and capacities. So in this region, we had 2 projects doing this rapid water accounting. So the first one is a FAO NINA office, FAO RNE's projects covering 8 countries. And also in FAO Iraq, we have a project on water accounting and productivity assessment targeting Kabat district and Dujaira irrigation district. So I cover 2 cases from these projects. So I want to start with Palestine rapid water accounting case in the northern West Bank. So this is a region where is bounded by the political boundary, the green line, which is Israel, and also a natural boundary, like watershed. And we had main questions for this site. The first one is regarding the sustainability. Is the water use in this area is sustainable or not? And then also we wanted to figure out the water shortage level in the area. And this was conducted by a water accounting team consisting of ministry workers in Palestine. Okay, so some of the key findings are as follows. Okay, we could assess supply-demand gap, and it exists in both ag and municipal sectors. But we had to estimate municipal system efficiency through like a rough assumption from the governmental database. So there's a room for improvement in terms of the estimation of supply in this figure. And also the water accounting team tried to get the water balance in the area to understand the sustainability, but we had they had some difficulties. Okay, so we added up all the inflows and outflows, And that shows that there are more inflows than outflows. So in that case, groundwater or some sort of water storage have to increase. However, on the ground, if we look at the groundwater wells in the region, the groundwater is declining. So they're guessing that, okay, there are some uncertainties in groundwater components, inflow, outflow, pumping, recharge, and also evapotranspiration. So they started the second round of water counting to reduce uncertainties in these components. Okay. So this is the next case is from Kabat in Iraq. Because this is already the rapid water counting draft report was already done, and the Dujera one is actually ongoing. So this is the area along the Greater Zab River, which joins the Tigris River. And this area is a completely administrative boundary. So there's nothing to do with the hydrological boundary. And the water counting team conducted a survey to farmers and ministry stakeholders. And we came up with these questions to inform the stakeholders. So what is the groundwater depletion rate? Because it's known that the water table is going down. Also, are there sufficient alternative water sources if we want to stop or slow down the groundwater depletion? And also, there are some plans that is to develop reservoirs upstream, both in Iraq and also in Turkey. So what would be the impacts to the Kabat in terms of water availability? Interestingly, all of these questions are developed from the concerns from ministry workers. Farmers did not really have concerns on water. That was a very interesting observation. Okay, so compiling all the available data, we could estimate roughly that the groundwater depletion rate is about 400 million cubic meter from 2001 to 2019 in 19 years. However, this number could be 300 or 500. The uncertainty of this number is quite huge. And the user of this groundwater is mainly irrigation, agriculture. And somehow depletion accelerated in the early 2010s, although we couldn't really find out why this happened. We need further assessment. And also we assessed the surface water availability in the Greater Zab River. And we found that the flow is huge, and it's definitely more than enough to replace the groundwater use in the Kabat area. However, if this would happen, this would result in reduced flow for the downstream area. So if such a plan to be developed, it has to definitely address the downstream water needs. And also we accumulated all the potential water withdrawals from upstream reservoir construction that are planned. And Kabat district would have sufficient water even if everything is constructed. However, the downstream Kabat outside of the study area is not the case. They will probably suffer from water scarcity. We figure that even if everything is constructed, Greater Zab at Kabat has more than 1 billion cubic meter, while the demand in Kabat is about just 50 million cubic meter. Okay. So from these two studies and also other rapid water counting studies, I could highlight some common challenges and benefits of the rapid water counting in this region. So the limited resources is definitely the common challenge in the rapid water counting. There are some more analysis, more detailed studies we could possibly conduct if the time, human resources, budget, capacities really allow. And also the data availability is a challenge because we are not going to the field to collect new data. Typically evapotranspiration, actual evapotranspiration, and groundwater components and return flow, those are hard to get the data with good accuracy. And also, if you want to develop a good water balance, it's quite, you have to expect the big challenge in doing it, partially because of these limitations mentioned above. while even though this approach depends on the existing data, we can extract good useful information for decision making. For example, in many studies, we could do supply versus demand comparison. So we could highlight which people or which region, which sector is struggling for a water supply demand gap. Also, rapid water counting accounts or distinguishes consumptive and non-consumptive uses so that it informs better in terms of sustainable water management. And also, this is a good capacity building for the water accounting team or staff in order to prepare them for the second round of water accounting with more advanced tools. And also, rapid water accounting definitely provides recommendations on data needs for future or better water accounting or better information for management so that you can streamline the investment for data collection in future. So I thank you very much for listening, and I hope I can answer questions. We have time for that. Yep.
Thank you, Jiro. Thank you for highlighting this. This is an important element. Water accounting is the tool for better planning of water resources, and that is why we really focused on this project in Iraq on building capacity on water accounting. Realizing that all the data collection was done last year, and of course with mobility limitations, you can imagine how difficult that was. Well, we're moving to our last speaker, Mr. Ahmed Al-Ubaidi. Mr. Al-Ubaidi is currently working on water productivity and water accounting issues at the middle and southern zone of Iraq. He formerly worked for the Ministry of Irrigation and Water Resources in Iraq as a supervision engineer, designer, and of reclamation projects. He was the chief engineer in Iraq Water Resources Network Operation and research manager. He holds a master's and a PhD on hydraulics and water resources engineering. Mr. Al-Ubaidi, I think you are there at the podium, so I'll give you the floor to present from there.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. السيدات والسادة الحضور، يسعدني أحييكم جميعا ويسعدني أن أشارككم هذه البرزنتيشن أو العرض. والعرض مالتنا راح يكون هو استكمال لما تحدث به المتحدث الأول مستر ناكوزي، اللي تحدث عن التحديات اللي تواجه الموارد المائية سواء بسبب زيادة الاستخدام في دول الجوار أو بسبب متغيرات المناخ. كذلك استكمال لما ذكره باسكيلو حول الزيادة في السكان والزيادة في الأراضي مع النقصان في المياه والتغيرات الجوية. بصراحة أنا اخترت موضوع إنه هو موضوع الثرثار أو تحلية الثرثار ضمن موضوع الانتجريتد water resource management.
Can they share the presentation? Thank you.
بالحقيقة الثرثار يعتبر هو الهيرت اوف ذا سيستم، احنا نسميه او قلب المنظومه، منظومه الموارد المائيه العراقيه. عليه نعتمد بحالات الفيضان، وعليه نعتمد في حالات الحاجه الى مياه اكثر لاغراض الري. فالثرثار يلعب دور رئيسي ومهم بالحقيقه. فمن هذا الباب انا اخترت هذا الموضوع حتى ينسجم اتمنى مع متطلبات هذه الجلسة الموضوعية. الثرثار يحتل السنتر لدجلة والفرات والمنظومة كليتها، المنظومة اللي تبدي بمنظومة سامراء اللي أنشئت عام 56، واللي من خلالها يمكن أن نحول المياه إلى منخفض الثرثار. الثرثار منخفض كبير مغلق هو، مرحبا سيادة الوزير. الثرثار ليك كبيرة، وهي نستخدمها طبعا للخزين وكذلك نستعملها للكنترول كما ذكرنا في حالات الحاجة إلها. والحاجة تدعونا اليوم، ودعتنا من قبل أيضا منذ الثمانينات أنه نهتم بالثرثار كمجهز للمياه وليس فقط للفيضان، رغم هو أنشئ عام 56 لغرض درء الفيضان، ولعب دور أساسي في درء الفيضان عن مدينة بغداد عام 69 والسنوات اللاحقة. أنا هنا اختاريت فقط، حاولت يعني أعرف أو أدرس موضوع الإنفلو والأوت فلو ونوعية المياه في هذا المنخفض فقط من خلال التي دي اس والاس او 4 للسنوات العشرة الأخيرة ما بين 2010 إلى 2020. وحاولت أن أعمل مقارنة مع السنوات السابقة. بالحقيقة منذ بدء التشغيل كانت تي دي الاس او 4 أو الكبريتات بي عالية، وكذلك التي دي اس. لكن بصراحة أنا هنا أود أن أشير إلى جهود وزارة الري ووزارة الموارد المائية على مدى سنوات طويلة، هو أنه حاولت تحافظ على منخفض الثرثار حتى يؤدي الغرضين المطلوبة من عنده، سواء للفيضان واللي كانت الإدارة إلى ناجحة بشكل عام، وكذلك محاولة الحفاظ على التي دي اس والاس او 4 within the limit مالتهم، رغم انه احيانا ما صار تجاوز، بس احيانا ممكن يكون التي دي اس عالي او توتال ديزولف سالز يعلى بسبب الحاجه الى الري. الثرثار ليك هو يتوسط المنظومه مالتنا ما بين محافظات صلاح الدين وما بين الانبار وبغداد، ومساحته حوالي 2710 كيلومتر مربع، with the highest operation level بأعلى منسوب إلى التشغيل 65، ومع حجم خزني 85 مليار متر مكعب، ومنسوب أوطى وصل عندنا هو أوطى المنسوب الأوطى لأغراض التشغيل نحافظ على الديد ستورج بي إلى 40 متر فوق مستوى سطح البحر، و35 هو كان العفو للسنة الأخيرة. الدبريشن استخدمناه للخزين منذ سنة 65، والليك connected with the Tigris and please ممكن نشوف الصورة؟ sorry next. آسف. حضور الكرام، هنا الثرثار يتوسط المحافظات الثلاثة، الأنبار، صلاح الدين، وبغداد، والمياه القادمة إلى من نهر دجلة من خلال الثرثار تايغرس كانال اللي يدخل إلى الثرثار ثم يوزع إلى ذراعين دجلة والفرات، والقصد منهم هو تجهيز مدينة بغداد والفلوجة في الفرات بالمياه أثناء الشحة أو الحاجة إلها. بالإضافة لأنه إحنا يحصل أنه الوزارة كانت تستخدم ولو يعني كما يبدو أنها تستخدم الموديل، تستخدم التشغيل لغرض المحافظة على نوعية المياه بشكل عام، بأنه تحاول تمرر المياه في الثرثار حتى لو أحيانا عدم الحاجة إلى الري، بس تحاول تحلي البحيرة قدر الإمكان، تحتفظ بتحلية مستمرة طيلة الفترة. احنا هنا الهدف من عندها انه نحاول نحافظ على الثرثار بصراحة الى اطول مدة ممكنة، يعني واللي هي تجي ضمن احد اهداف تنمية الموارد المائية، هو انه نحافظ على نوعية المياه بالقدر الامكن. بدأت الدراسات منذ 79، كانت اول دراسة هو انه ناديكو الهولندية نذرلاندز اندعت من قبل وزارة الري في وقتها، وحاولت تجاوب على سؤال. السؤال هو how should the lake be operated in order to maximize irrigation and flood control function of the Tigris and Euphrates system وأنه شلون نقدر أن نشغل المنظومة ونحافظ على أكبر ما يمكن من كميات الري اللي ممكن نجهزها مع درء الفيضان. As part of this, كجزء من هذا السؤال جرت دراسة، والدراسة كانت واسعة بصراحة ومطولة، ممكن للراغبين أن ممكن يشوفها واحد. بس الهدف مال الدراسة والتارجت هو أنه يحافظون على SO4 للبحيرة يبقى بحدود 400، أو أنه بديل آخر هو 500، يحافظ على 500 بارت بير مليون للبحيرة. وإحنا حالياً بدنا نوصل هذه الأرقام. يعني الفترة اللي أخذناها بالتشغيل، يعني أنا ما أنسب الفضل إلي، وإنما يعني أقصد إلى العراق كبلد يقوم بالتشغيل بالموارد، أنه يعتبر بالحقيقة لحد الآن هو تشغيل جيد. نعم، رغم التشغيل اللي يقترحوه بال79 هو انه يوصلون الى ال 400 او ال 500 ببديلين. انه البديل الاول هو انه يفتح الثرثار ويغلق دجله، والبديل الثاني هو انه الثرثار يكون مفتوح للفرات لكن مع غلق دجله، مع فتح دجله ايضا. هذا يمكن ياخذ 4 إلى 5 سنوات على مود يحسن النوعيه الى 400. Next please. ايضا لازلنا احنا هنا ضمن الحدود اللي ضمن الاهداف اللي نرجوها. بالحقيقه جرت دراسات، منها دراسات للمصبات في الفلوجه وفي بغداد، ولاحظوا انه في منطقه الفلوجه كانت مصب الفرات يعني لا زال انه مياهها ضمن الحدود المسموحه باستثناء الديجري اوف تيربيديتي، بعض الحالات التيربيديتي والكتريكال كوندكتيفيتي والتوتال ديزولف سالتس احيانا يرتفع، لكنه بعد ضمن الحدود المسموحه. رغم هاي يدعو الباحثين اللي يمكن طفرنا اسمهم بصراحه، لكن يدعون الى وضع التشريعات وكذلك الى الاهتمام بهذا الموضوع للحفاظ على موضوع الفلوجه. النماذج اللي ياخذوها في وزاره الموارد هو انه ياخذون 0.3 عمق و5 و10 و15، وعندهم فد allowable limits لقياساتهم تعتمدها الفاو جزء من عندها، وجزء على العراقي الستاندرد نمبر 25، والتي دي اس كان هنا بحدود 1500 الستاندرد. دراسة أخرى بصراحة أيضاً موجودة عندنا في الوزارة، تأخذ 8 مواقع لمدخل الثرثار نفسه في البحيرة عندما الناظم يبدي يوزع إلى دجلة والفرات، وكذلك كانت النتائج مقبولة لحد هذا الوقت. الجراوند ووتر اللي يخص المنظومة مال الثرثار هو وكذلك الووتر بجت مالتها، انه لاحظ احد الباحثين بانه 38% هي معدل ماء اغلبه يروح الى كمدخلات، لكن يروح من 56% كريتشارج من البحيره، والجراوند ووتر فلو از ابروكسيمتلي 5 مرات بقد البريسبيتيشن، والليكج من الثرثار هو 10 مرات بقد الاستيميتد ايفابوريشن. هذا يعتمد على الباحث اللي ذكره، ما ملزمين به بس للاطلاع.
دكتور احمد،
اللي يريد يتوسع بدراسه الثرثار ويطلع على المشكله، بالحقيقه احد الباحثين العراقيين سيساكيان في 2011 اشار الى منخفض الثرثار بانه منخفض مغلق، واعمق نقطه به كانت -3، والثرثار was found to be calcification and continuous sinking. لا وممكن واحد يتوسع بالمعلومات من خلال المصادر اللي ذكرها ساسكيان، وهو واحد من كبار الجيولوجيين العراقيين بصراحه.
دكتور احمد تسمعني؟ اتمنى عليك لو تسرع شويه.
الاناليسز مال الافيلبل داتا المتوفره عندنا، سواء كانت من حيث التبخر، احنا هنا يتبخر من الثرثار رقم كبير بصراحه، يصل الى 2.25 متر سنويا، والارتفاع والخصائص الفيزيائيه لهذا الخزان هو انه بالووتر ليفل مالته يوصل الى 65 ومقابله يقابله 85 مليار متر مكعب، ومساحه كبيره تصل الى 2000. بصراحه هذا الرقم كبير، هو 85 مليار، هي تعادل تقريبا 3 مرات قد بحيره ميد بالولايات المتحده. اذا امكن بعد الانفلو اوت فلو للثرثار، مثل ما نلاحظ انه وصل عندنا التصاريف اللي تدخل للخزان 4000، لكن لازلنا بال500 او في هذا الحدود لل10 سنوات الاخيره فيما يتعلق للانفلو بلس اوت فلو. لكن يلاحظ اللون الاخضر هو انه شلون تاثيرات الايفابوريشن واضحه كاضافه الى الخط الاحمر اللي هو تايغرس ويوفرتس ارمز، اللي تاخذ المياه من الثرثار باتجاه دجله والفرات. بصراحه انا هذا الدايجرام هو اللي اريد اشير اليه بشكل مركز، هو انه الليك ثرثار لو نلاحظ بالافرج يير يدخلها 8 مليارات، لكن بالدراير نلاحظ انه يدخلها 1.7 مليار، لكن مقابل هذا ال 1.7 هنالك ايفابوريشن زائدا حاجه نسحب منه هو 8 مليار، اي انه هذا الخزان بالسنوات القادمه والتوسع بالمياه في دول الاعالي راح نواجه نقصان مقداره 6 مليار حسب ما مذكور في كل الدوكومنت العالميه. بصراحه يمكن هسه احنا اللي نلاحظه هو انه اكو بحدود 2 مليار انسحبت، لكن بعد اكو 4 مليار بالتوسع عند انشاء سد سلوان وسد السدود الاخرى الموجوده في تركيا المنوي استكماله اللي راح تاخذ بحدود 4 مليار. فاحنا راح نواجه شيء من الشحه، يعني راح نواجه شحه دائمه مقدارها بالنسبه للثرثار ربما ما راح نتمكن من استدامته، راح يبقى بس للفيضان. فهذه النتيجه اللي حبيت انا اوصلها، ويمكن عندي بعض معلومات اذا الوقت يسمح. اوكي
دكتور احمد اتمنى عليك لو انك تسرع شويه في العرض.
الووتر كواليتي هنا عندنا في دجله في سامره تلاحظون كيف انه هو بحدود ال 400 بالنسبه للتي دي اس، وبحدود ال 200، يعني اثنينهم within the its best water، لكنه يرتفع عندما يمر الى بغداد بسبب حاجتنا الى الخلط اللي نحتاجه مضطرين بسبب قله الموارد. كذلك بالووتر كواليتي، الووتر كواليتي هنا عندي التي دي اس هو اللون البرتقالي يوصل بال 800، وكذلك الاس او 4 من 400 او اقل. فعموما بالاس او 4 يمكن هو ازيد، صار من الحد الطبيعي بسبب حالات التلوث وليس فقط التردي من الثرثار. هنا أنا أردت بصراحة أن ألفت النظر، يعني فقط أنه أنبه إلى أنه الحاجة إلى مستقبل الثرثار كمنخفض كبير، وبنفس الوقت يواجه صعوبة في الحفاظ عليه كمستودع مائي كبير، ويمكن راح نلتزم فقط بموضوع الفيضان وما نقدر نستفاد منه لأغراض الري، لكن هي محاولة فقط. هنا بالنسبة للتوصيات واضحة بصراحة أصبحت، وهي دعوتنا للدراسة وموديل جديد للأوبريشن للسد للخزان حتى نديم الانفلو اوت فلو أو نقلل من حالات الإيفابوريشن مع التشغيل. مع إضافة الكونتينيوس مونيتورينج، وأشكركم جدا.
شكرا دكتور أحمد على هذه المحاضرة القيمة والتأكيد على أهمية خزان الثرثار، وأيضا ضرورة العمل على تحسين إدارة الخزان والبحيرة بما يفضي إلى إدارة مستدامة للموارد المائية سواء الآتية من الدجلة والفرات أو الموارد المائية الجوفية. شكرا جزيلا دكتور أحمد. Dear participants, we have fallen into the trap that we had hoped for more time. Unfortunately, we started a little late. So I proposed that we join both discussions for this part and the panel part after the panel discussion. So we will have at the end of the session, let's say a possibility for question answer from the audience. Those who are joining us via Zoom or those who are present at the hotel in Baghdad. I hand it over to my colleague, Jean-Marc Feroz. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. We are now going to have a panel discussion around the issue of strategic planning of water resources management in the region. And this will focus on solutions. We do have 5 distinguished panelists, and I will share my screen to make sure that everybody can see. So we have with us Mr. Hamul Amrani, who is a senior advisor for water, energy, food security, and climate change nexus at the League of Arab States. We have Dr. Jacques Wherry, who is Deputy Director General for Research at the International Center for Agricultural Research in Dry Areas. We have Dr. Eman Soliman, who is Head of Planning Sector at the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation in Egypt. We have my colleague Jippe Hoogeveen, who is a Chief Technical Advisor for Remote Sensing Applications for Water Resources at FAO. And we have Dr. Ibrahim Abdul Razak, who is a senior engineer at the National Center for Water Resources Management in Iraq. If you allow me, I will now go and introduce every panelist with one question. And given the time, I will ask you to be relatively brief and to the point. I would like to ask my first question to Mr. Jacques Wherry, and I think it connects very well with the last presentation. Mr. Wherry, the research community has a lot to offer in better understanding issues and elaborating solutions that can help guiding more informed policies based on strong evidence. But this is not simple or straightforward. So how can we design research programs that better connect to policy requirements? And how are we sure to effectively transfer research findings into relevant policies, programs, and projects? You have the floor.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. And good afternoon all from Cairo. To be short, I would say that we need to share 2 paradigms to drive research for development related to water and agriculture in the region. The first one, I mean, this is open for discussion, but for me, the first one is to acknowledge that the fact that the challenge is clear for agriculture and food system in the region related to water. We need to produce more and more nutritious foods, creating jobs also for youth with less fresh water. It has already been explained because of climate change and overuse. So producing more and more nutritious food with less means a business as usual is not anymore an option, and I will elaborate on that. And for Ricarda, here's the overarching goal that is derived from that is to scale, to develop scalable solution and scaling methods to increase simultaneously the socioeconomic water productivity and the food and nutrition security, and especially in the context of family farmer. And we are addressing this across 4 types of agroecosystems where water scarcity is central, but solutions are different in the nexus. The fully irrigated systems in the fertile plains, which are most often the focus of water discussion, but also the rain-fed systems with supplementary irrigation, the agro-silvopastoral systems where water harvesting and specific type of irrigation is also an option, and the desert farming where we deal with sandy soil and non-renewable and more or less saline water. So across this, producing more with less water, I think, should drive all the research and research development that we conduct. The second paradigm is that solutions already exist, but they are largely unknown or not well known by stakeholders, or not implemented in an integrated manner, meaning combining different solutions like a drought-resistant crop and new systems of irrigation, and at different scales. And of course, these require proper enabling environments. And there are already also from this solution, a lot of evidence across the whole regions on the massive water efficiency and water productivity gain which can be gained from this, provided they are properly implemented and properly combined. In having a better irrigation solution with a variety which is susceptible to disease is not water productivity. And they are rarely integrated and adapted to farmers' needs. And so here for me, on the second paradigm, the role of research for development is really in collaboration between international centers, NARS partners, UN agency. I mean, we have had a lot of example country also to help to scale this systemic solution, combining different solutions at a different scale to make a real difference in the nexus. And I see 4 priority actions for research for development. I will each of them. The first one is we need more proof of concept that this integration of different solutions can really make a difference in a nexus to convince policymakers, development agencies, private sector investors to guide them. And for this, I clearly see a lack of dedicated public experimental sites in experimental farm, in watershed, where this integrated approach with quantification, for example, of the nexus is done. The second action is to really operationalize a digital methodology that can allow to quantify, to predict, and to assess the potential water productivity gains and the actual gaps in the real condition, and the 2 are important. We all know that digital technologies are growing exponentially, and we have had a lot of examples already in this conference, but it has also been already acknowledged that we lack reliable data from the ground and to cover the diversity of the systems, of the farming systems, of the type of use of water that we have in the conditions. The example of the lack of reliable evapotranspiration data is very important, and having networks like the one which is developed by FAO in the region is important. We also need to move from platforms, application to services to specific stakeholders with economic model to sustain these services. And beyond that, the question is how to have more coordination to improve synergy among the many platforms and efforts internationally in the region and also nationally to go from this digital platform to digital services. The third action is to have more participatory methodologies, innovation platform, but also blended finance mechanism between private and public partnership and capacity development. to allow for the upscaling of this integrated solution which can intervene in scenario analysis in the water accounting approach. And just to give an example, I think there is a large scope for making significant progress in the nexus that have been discussed today with diversified agriculture, which combine irrigated crops, rain-fed crops, and different technologies. So I'm not going to give details, but I think we all have in mind several examples. And when I'm saying that, it's scaling them to the country level, but acknowledging the fact that all farmers and all regions do not have the same needs. And the fourth action would be to engage the new generation of farmers, value chain actors, decision makers, and researchers in this more quantitative and more systemic approach, whatever it is, water accounting, whatever it is, multi-objective, multi-purpose farming systems. And of course, this implies also a significant transformation of the training systems and the university curriculum. For example, having more integration between water, energy, and agriculture curriculum to have people who can really support the scaling and the global assessment of this solution. I'm stopping here, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very concrete set of proposed solutions. This is really interesting. Let me just now move on to Mr. Hamul Lamrani. You have been working a lot in water resource management at the regional level. Could you elaborate on the links between regional and national policy development on water issues, and in particular on the progress that are being made in terms of addressing cross-sectoral coordination for better water management? Mr. Lamrani.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. First of all, allow me to thank the organizers of the conference and congratulate the Iraqi colleagues for the success of the first conference, and then would also like to thank FAO for putting this session on. 2 points actually, since we are supposed to be brief and to the point. Cross-sectoral and regional versus national. Actually, we have 2 concrete examples we heard from previous speakers today, the Water Scarcity Initiative and the RICAR initiative. Those 2 regional initiatives are examples of partnerships, regional partnerships, where policy makers are informed by science elaborated within those 2 partnerships. So for a good policy to happen at the regional level, it requires these kind of initiatives that provides evidence and then makes the policy decision easier and pertinent. Second element is working across sectors in the region. We have a concrete example in the work done within the German partnership with the League of Arab States on nexus water, energy, and food in the region. The 3 sectors working together has been tested at small scale. It requires capacity development. It requires reflection on institutions that could bridge the divide between the sectors in terms of planning, in terms of implementation of projects, and finally, in terms of setting policy that brings sectors together for efficiency and security of supply of water, food, and water, of course. The key element is to combine scaling up of what works in countries and bring it to the region, and then to trickle down the example of projects that worked across the region and that can benefit the countries. And in that sense, I will come to the second part of your question, is the experience we are having in LAS in bringing together the ministers of agriculture and the ministers of water for the first time in the region, just for the sake of making sure that they talk to each other. But more important is that they work together in the future. So the first joint ministerial council has led to two concrete and tangible outputs. One is a vision document, that is the Cairo Declaration for coherence and coordination between water and agriculture. That document would be the guiding document, the roadmap document we will be working and implementing together with our partners, FAO, ESCWA, and the Arab Organization for Agricultural Development. So the second outcome that the first Joint Ministerial Council has led to is the institutionalization of the coordination. What does this mean? The ministers agreed to establish a high-level committee with the necessary expertise and with the latitude for decision-making. The joint committee is supposed to be the implementing body for the decisions made in terms of coordination across sectors, particularly across agriculture and water. And that committee is now functional. We have already managed to get an action plan developed for the committee and a 5-year plan in discussion to be finalized in the next meeting of the high-level committee. The second element is that we are already implementing the generation of knowledge that is required as a set of priorities that were elaborated by the joint committee on water allocation, water productivity, water efficiency, non-conventional water, and the nexus, water, energy, and food. So for the first time, we have the two ministerial councils coming together. They have decided on a strategy document, that is the Cairo Declaration document, and they have decided on implementation through the creation of the high-level joint committee that is supposed to report to the Ministerial Council every 2 years. So those are elements that show that good strategy, good planning, and clear vision can bring the two sectors together. It doesn't mean that there are not there are no challenges or issues to be faced in the coordination. One is the turnover in the composition of the committee. That's a challenge. The second element is to maintain the same level of commitment by the ministers of agriculture and ministers of water, the sustainability of the business of the committee, the institutionalize the financing mechanism, and also the difficulty to work across on parallel tracks, local, regional, and national. So those are the challenges we are aware about and we are working on. But of course, our assets are mainly the political will to bring the sectors together and to ensure coherence and coordination in planning for water and agriculture. The second element is that we have, or the second asset is the support of our partners. I'm taking the opportunity to express the last, or the League of Arab States gratitude to FAO, ESCWA, and AOD for their support in this endeavor. And of course, we think of the potential for this coordination in terms of having national programs based on the regional activities we are carrying out, and bring down, for instance, the sustainable water allocation at the regional level to the local and national scale. So national, regional, it's a two-way exchange, it's a two-way cooperation to bring together what is working in the countries at the regional level and bring to the countries what is working at the regional level. So with this, I will hand over to you, Jean-Marc, and again, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I'm unfortunately a little bit pressed by organizers too, because we have taken a lot of time and we started late. But so I would like to ask the remaining panelists to really be short and to the point. And I apologize for this. I would like to ask Dr. Ayman Soliman. In Egypt, like in Iraq and many countries of the region, making the best use of limited water resources is a central element of national water strategies. Could you share with us some of the strategies that Egypt is putting in place for ensuring sustainable allocation of water resources and ensuring water use efficiency in all sectors? You have the floor.
First, I would like to thank you for giving me the chance to share you in this very important session. I would like to congratulate our colleague from Iraq for successful of the conference. Actually, Egypt started several years ago to have a strategic plan to use the water resources in all sectors. We have the National Water Resource Plan up to year 2037. And we have 4 pillars concerning this plan. We started with the first pillar, which is development new water resources. And we have the second pillar, which is rationalize the water use in all sectors. The third pillar is increasing the water quality, which is too important in water management. The fourth one is regarding enabling environment, because a lot of measures needs some laws and some regulations to be effective. For the first pillar, actually, as you heard about the National Desalination Program in Egypt, which we decided to transform all the coastal water treatment plant to be desal plants, and we have a plan to desalinate about 3 billion cubic meter within time frame of the National Water Resource Plan, which is a huge amount, consume a lot of money, but actually we have a limited resources, and we had to use any new source in water resources. Also, we have a mega project in rainfall harvesting, flash flood, in remote areas like Sinai and Marsa Matruh. We depend on the rainfall, which is come in 1 or 2 months during the year, but we have more than 1,500 construction to save the water and to store water to be used all over the year. For the rationalize of the water use in different sectors, we started with the agriculture sector. We have a mega project for canal rehabilitation, where we have target to rehabilitate about 20,000 kilometers of canals in Egypt and reconstruct the cross-section, reduce the cross-section to be effective and to increase the efficiency of the conveyance of water and reduce any losses from transformation of water across the canals. We have also a national program for transformation from flood irrigation to modern irrigation, and this program we have cooperation with a lot of partners to formalize the policy and the action plan for this project. Our plan is to transform about 4 million faddan from flood irrigation to modern system in old lands. This program may be extended to 5 years, where we now started to transform 1 million faddan. We have a lot of campaign with farmers to use techniques and also have some actions to expand the project. In drinking water sector, also we started some institutional setup, like change the pricing and make some different categories for water pricing for different uses. Very important to reduce the losses in the water sector. Also, with Ministry of Agriculture, we started to eliminate some varieties of crops, which is consume a lot of water. We started with rice, and we have a ministerial decree limit the area of cultivating rice. We started also to any varieties consume a lot of water. When we go to the third pillar, which is water quality, now is depend on water use to fill the gap between the water resources and water demand. We started to have mega project to treat agriculture water in some agriculture projects like Bahr al-Bahr, Mahsama. We recently finalized the Mahsama project. Bahr al-Bahr is going to be finalized within 1 year, and those two projects will add about 2.5 billion cubic meter the water and fill the gap in some agriculture project to be used to fill in cultivating certain crops. Now we are studying another mega project similar to Bahr al-Bahr in western part, where we will add also another 3 billion cubic meter to the western part area. We will use this treated water in agricultural purposes. Those projects help the country to enhance the efficiency. However, we consider Egypt from the highest countries in water efficiency and water productivity, as we reuse the water more than 4 times, but we will work to have more and more. We don't have any choices because we have a limited water resources. Also with the Ministry of Housing, we had a plan for wastewater treatment in villages and rural areas to increase the water quality and to make sure that all the water resources comply with the global standard. The fourth pillar, which is the most important one, now we had started the new law. We changed the irrigation and the drainage law. We finalized some discussion in Parliament, and tomorrow we will have a final decision about the law, which will utilize the water resources. We added articles for groundwater use and make sustainable use of the groundwater. We added part for modern irrigation. We added part to rationalize the water use and make it illegal problem, and we will make some fine, and we will enforce application of any articles related to misuse of water resources. We have also some articles for protection of the shorelines and dealing with climate change. Also within this pillar, we have started a big process for making inventory regarding the water resources system, and we have portal include all the network, all the information. We make use of this information to our colleagues in the field, where they can use a mobile application to see the status of the network itself, the status of the level and discharge. Also, we use telemetry as collecting information about the water levels in all canals. We try to facilitate the management of the network in easy way, using the remote sensing and early warning system. I remember last year when we issued alert before 12 March storm, this alarm system saved the country. We presented the alert to the cabinet, and the Prime Minister started to take action and give vacation to all the country, and the readiness to face this problem were high and save a lot of money and a lot of also people.
Thank you. And it's a very impressive and comprehensive program, and I wish we had more time to discuss it. Thank you so much. Let me just go now to Mr. Yipe Overveen. Mr. Overveen, could you share with us, we heard about this already several times, could you share with us your experience in remote sensing technologies and how you think such technologies can help countries manage their water resources better? The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Jean-Marc. Over the last 5 years, I've been working at FAO on a system to monitor land and water productivity by remote sensing. This system is called WAPOR, and that stands for Water Productivity through Open Access of Remotely Sensed Derived Data. Currently, this system covers the whole of Africa and the Middle East, and with data from 2009 up to now. The idea is that from now on we will expand the system to cover the rest of the world also, and maybe even increase the time series. So what we do is we collect the freely available satellite images with different spatial resolutions that vary from 30 to 250 meters. And they have a time interval of 10 days. These images we use to calculate, among others, biomass and evapotranspiration. We do this by using open source models. The information on biomass is specifically useful to predict, for example, the impacts of droughts. This can be done already early in the cropping season. For example, we have assessed the biomass accumulation during various cropping seasons and compared it with crop statistics. And it appeared to have a very nice match. The biomass accumulation during the crop, if the biomass accumulation during the cropping season follows a certain pattern which is below normal, the reduction in crop production can be predicted fairly accurately. And this is, of course, very useful information for governments to anticipate early on crop failure due to droughts. The information on evapotranspiration, as assessed by remote sensing, is very useful for water accounting purposes. We heard already this in earlier presentations. In this
Are we having, hello, are you there?
Can we unmute Mr. Yepi, please, for the organizers? Can you unmute?
Yes. Okay. No, I was back. I'm back now. I hope you hear me. Yeah.
We hear you. We hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the information on evapotranspiration as assessed through remote sensing is very useful for water accounting purposes. I just said that. So in this panel, I cannot give a presentation, but behind me you see a virtual background of the annual evapotranspiration in the area around the Gezira scheme in Sudan. That's over there, and you can also see the new Halfa scheme at Bara River, and that is over there. With such images, we can monitor the evapotranspiration in irrigation schemes and calculate the influence of irrigation schemes on the water balance, in this case of the Nile. We also use this type of information to monitor and map irrigated areas over the year. For Jordan, for example, we compared such maps with data on well permits. The authorities can use such information to check whether the areas are irrigated from legal or illegal wells, and how much water is being used compared to the registered water use. So now going back to the large-scale irrigation system as the one behind me, in Sudan, we work with local water managing institutions who use this type of information to develop better informed water allocations at times of water scarcity. If you study the information carefully and combine it with local knowledge from the field, you can assess the performance of irrigated schemes and develop irrigation modernization. If you combine the maps on biomass and evapotranspiration, you can calculate water productivity. So the amount of crop drop. We are now seeing also how we can use this information to help monitoring progress towards the Sustainable Development Goal 6 on water for all, and in particular SDG target 6.4 on water scarcity and water efficiency. But the last example I would like to give is about Syria, for which we use both the information on evapotranspiration and biomass to help assessing the damage on irrigation scheme and loss of crop production due to the war. The whole program has been set up with financial support of the government of the Netherlands, and they agreed to fund it for another 5 years, which started from last January. It has been decided that for the second phase, we will also look for cooperation with the Iraqi authorities and implement implications focused specifically to the needs of Iraq. And I would leave it to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think I got a message. My colleague Salah, who is in the room, wanted to take the floor. Hello.
Networking. I'm تشتغل. Okay. Still, Mr. Brahim Abdelrazak, على أساس he should be having an intervention.
Sure. No, you asked me. Okay. So let me just ask Mr. Abdelrazak to share with us the efforts that are done in Iraq in improving irrigation efficiency and agricultural water productivity. Mr. Abdelrazak, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Special thanks to the Minister of Water Resources for organizing such great event, which really give us the opportunity to participate, put our thoughts in, and change the ideas on the global basis. All of us know that demand of water is rising dramatically, in which the supply becomes more uncertain, which drives the need for major shifts in water allocation between sectors to support continued economic growth. The main water resources in Iraq are categorized by the surface water and groundwater. The surface water is represented by Tigris and Euphrates. These resources are greatly affected by the main river basins, which is located in the upstream countries. Actually, Iraq's share of water has been affected greatly in the past decades due to the growing activities and projects in upstream countries. Right now, to overcome this problem and to improve irrigation use efficiency and agricultural water productivity, we need to know that every drop of water needs to be counted. The strategic study in Iraq includes a plan to increase the irrigation efficiency up to 60%. This could be achieved by using modern irrigation techniques that reduce losses, use of appropriate nozzles, measurement of soil moisture, and then keeping records of irrigation reduction to assess the effectiveness. Rehabilitation of irrigation projects, applying the irrigation using pipelines, and updating the irrigation projects with regard to physical soil properties. The Ministry of Water Resources highly considered the regional climate change and its impact by communicating and coordinating with the upstream countries in order to deal with the dry and rainy seasons to get a fair and required Iraqi share of water. The advances in the use of remote sensing technologies will increasingly make it possible to estimate the real evapotranspiration of crops from the farmer fields. The Ministry of Water Resources also taken strong action against water excesses by preventing the farmers and removing such excesses. Also, there are awareness campaigns through advertisements to use the modern irrigation techniques, the benefits of these irrigation techniques, and the how to reduce the losses, its impact on how to reduce the losses. Using modern hydrologic and hydraulic simulation models to track rainwater in various watersheds in the country and upstream countries in order to count for a real discharge, which can give us an indication of the amount of water available to achieve successful agricultural plans in order to ensure the required types of crop to be planted and secure sustainable food security. Right now, Iraqi researchers achieved various studies and published their work into international journals and into conference proceedings. And this, right now, the work is ongoing actually towards the best. I would like to add the great role of water use associations in Iraq, as they are increasing right now, because they are considered as a successful and wonderful experience towards a prosperous future for water resources in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we really got from all 5 panelists extremely rich discussion. We are very sorry that we don't have much time now for discussion because we have gone to the end of our meeting. I would like to give the floor to Dr. Salah for closing this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Marc, and thank you, colleagues. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Salah Haj Hassan, FAO representative in Iraq. First of all, let me thank and congratulate His Excellency, the Minister of Water Resources and his team for all the efforts made to bring this conference into being really happening and these during very critical time. And here I should acknowledge the efforts made by the team of the Minister of Water Resources, the chairman of the steering committee organizing the conference, Mr. Qazem and Mr. Jamal, and all the team behind the scheme that they were doing day and night efforts to bring this conference into practice. Also, it's not only happening that this conference in these critical times, but also having all these wide range of resources in terms of human resources that have been arriving here in Baghdad or remotely joining this conference was very important from all scientific, practical, and technical aspects. Not to forget the efforts made by Her Excellency, the permanent representative and ambassador of Iraq in Rome, that was also engaged in supporting the implementation of this conference. The colleagues that have been joining us from FAO and headquarters and regional office, also from USQA, ICARDA, and all the colleagues, I wish to thank them also for their participation. Not to forget thanking our partners, mainly the EU and the Japanese, as well as our colleagues from the Netherlands, having us implementing several support projects in Iraq, and as we are co-leading the donor and the donor group for agriculture and water, and the commitment to Your Excellency would be to take the recommendations and the outcomes of this conference into the discussion within this group that includes large number of partners from international as well as donor communities. The very important point that I wanted to highlight before closing, that this is an opportunity for all of us to bring more support into practice for Iraq, especially during this period. We are all committed, and here I should echo the words that have been addressed by our Director General, that our commitment is to continue supporting, working hand in hand with the government of Iraq to bring all support and to do all what is possible really to support the Iraqi farmers in these challenging times. Your Excellency, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much also for sharing the session that FAO has been implementing in this conference, and I wish you a successful rest of the day. Thank you very much.
معالي الوزير، نقدر ناخذ 5 دقائق للنقاشات ويا الساده الحضور؟ 5 دقائق. يلا
معاليك في فيديو بس اذا للوقت سامح عن مشروع الجزيره. تفضلوا اذا سمحتوا تحطوا الفيديو بس، لاني انا ما بدي اخذ اكثر من الوقت اذا سمحت.
لا حقيقه منه اللي يعني دي ينسق الامور، انا ما عندي مانع، ما اعرف الوقت يمكن.
عارف الوقت صار مضغوط، مشان هيك عم نحاول ما نغير الاجنده.
لا
بس
انا ما عندي مانع، بس ما اعرف منو اللي يقوده. اوكي.
العفو، أنا عندي الحقيقة بعض المداخلة فيما يتعلق بما طرح من محاضرات في هذه المحاضرة والمحاضرة الأولى وفي الجلسة الصباحية. كان هناك تأكيد على موضوع رفع كفاءة الري خاصة في القطاع الزراعي لأن الزراعة هي المستهلك الرئيسي للمياه. بالواقع هذه هي أهم مخرجات الدراسة الاستراتيجية للمياه والأراضي في العراق اللي تمت في سنة 2015 وصودق عليها، ووزارة الري تعمل بها حاليا، وزارة الموارد المائية تعمل بها حاليا بكل جدية، إلا أن هناك حقائق يجب أن يدركها كافة الأخوة الموجودين وأيضا زملائنا في منظمة FAO لكونهم أكدوا بشكل كبير على هذا الموضوع، ونحن أيضا نؤكد على هذا الموضوع. موضوع ما تعرض له العراق، لم تكن هناك فرصة متاحة للعراق لتأهيل مشاريع الإروائية بالشكل المطلوب، وهذه هي النقطة الحيوية اللي يريد نأكد عليها. الموضوع الآخر، هذه جوانب المظلمة، لكن هناك جوانب مشرقة على أرض الواقع يا سادتي. العراق يتبع طرق الري الحديثة للأسف الشديد، لأن دائما تطرح أنه اتباع طرق الري التقنيات الحديثة وطرق. حاليا هناك مساحات شاسعة من الأراضي تزرع بواسطة الري بالتنقيط، مساحات لزراعة الخضر في مناطق صحراوية، في منطقة الزبير وصفوان وفي منطقة النجف وكربلاء، وهناك إنتاج زراعي رائع. حاليا هناك فائض في الإنتاج الزراعي من الطماطم وباقي المحاصيل. إذن وأيضا هناك أعداد كبيرة جدا للبيوت المحمية اللي تستخدم طريقة الري بالتنقيط، وهناك إنتاج زراعي جيد. هناك استخدام الري بالرش بمساحات شاسعة بالعراق، وخاصة الري المحوري على استخدام المياه الجوفية. هناك تجارب واعدة باستخدام طرق الري بالتنقيط في الحقول المروية لزراعة النخيل، في تجربة كبيرة في الديوانية وتجربة أخرى في ديالى وتجربة في البصرة على مساحات ليست قليلة، يعني مساحات جيدة. وهناك هذه الأمور كلها تصير بالاستثمار وليس مع بعض الدعم من الحكومة. حقيقة هذه التجارب المشرقة يجب أن لا ننساها. تجارب أخرى تكرر هو ترشيد المياه وإعادة استخدامه. نعم، العراق يعيد استخدام المياه المجة اللي هي براكش ووتر، المصب العام، حاليا تستخدم مياهها. سابقا كانت الدعاية تقول أن مياه العراق تهدر إلى الخليج. هذا الموضوع لم يعد صحيحا حاليا يا سادتي. حاليا هناك خطط مدروسة ودقيقة بشأن استخدام المياه إلى أبعد حد. هناك حملة رائعة جدا من الوزارة بمنع التجاوز، بمنع الهدر. حقيقة احنا نتمنى أنه لو كان في هذا المؤتمر جانب لإثارة هذه الأمور، وأنا حاولت لأن احنا كنا متلقين على هاي الأيام، لكن لازم نبين وجهة نظرنا بشكل واضح إلى السادة الحضور وإلى يعني بشكل دقيق. هذه فيما يتعلق بالموضوع الأول. الموضوع الآخر هو محاضرة الدكتور أحمد على موضوع الثرثار. أيضا الدراسة الاستراتيجية أوضحت أن الثرثار سوف لن يكون من ضمن منظومة تشغيلية للموارد المائية، فقط يستخدم لأغراض الفيضان. هذه حقيقة لازم ندركها لتخفيض نسبة التبخر من المسطحات المائية الواسعة في منطقة لأن كمية التبخر حاليا نسبتها جدا عالية، تتجاوز 8 مليار متر مكعب. هناك نية في تخفيضها إلى حوالي 4.5 مليار فقط، وذلك بتقليص المسطحات المائية الواسعة. الموضوع الآخر اللي أريد أذكره بالنسبة للثرثار، طريقة تغذية نهر الفرات تكون عن القناة الإروائية المخطط لها أن تطور لكي تنقل 250 متر مكعب من المياه العذبة من مقدم سد السامراء إلى الفرات مباشرة، لأن كل التسجيلات اللي عندنا توضح أنه لا يوجد ارتفاع تراكيز الملحية لم تزداد في سامراء عن 400 جزء بالمليون. عموما هذه الحقيقة النظام الهيدروليكي في نهر دجلة تغير أيضا بعد إنشاء سد أليسو، وأيضا حاليا يجري العمل بسد سليفان الواقع على أعالي نهر دجلة شمال شرق منطقة ديار بكر. للأسف احنا كنا نتمنى أن تكون يعني الكوبريشن أو الاتصال مع اخواننا الفنيين في من الجانب التركي اقوى لمعرفه الكثير، التباحث حول الكثير من هذه النقاط، لان متغير كبير في نهر دجله سيحدث. هذا المتغير يجب ان ناخذ بنظر الاعتبار في ضوء احنا نحصل المعلومات حسب المعلومات المتوفره عندنا انه الاستاذ سليفان سوف يدخل الى الخدمه في سنه 2022. اذا نهر دجله سيتغير، المنظومه داخل العراق ستتغير. فعلا موضوع سد مكحول لربما يكون له تأثير إيجابي في حالة إنشاء لغرض تغذية القناة الإروائية وتغذية نهر الفرات، المساعدة في تغذية نهر الفرات. عموما أنا فقط تداخلت وأنا أخذت وقت طويل للأسف وأرجو المعذرة يعني، بس هذا شفت المواضيع حيوية ومهمة. مثل هذا مؤتمر يعقد في العراق لأول مرة، وهذا احنا نفتخر بهذه الخطوة وسعداء جدا يعني لهذه الفرصة أن تتاح لنا لتوضيح وجهات النظر العلمية اللي تخدم وتصب في النهضة في هذه المنظومة. وأنا أتمنى يعني أن يكون العون بكافة الطرق من أجل النقلة الموضوعية في هذه المنظومة. منظومة الإرواء في العراق هي من أقدم المنظومات الرائعة في المنطقة، إلا أنه مع الأسف ما مر في العراق معروف للجميع وهو السبب الرئيسي بما وصلنا إليه. لكن هناك أمل، هناك عمل، وهناك جدية. وشكرا جزيلا.
شكرا أستاذ عون. بس لحتى سمحت لي لجاوبك على السؤال الأول.
نعم.
إذا سمحتوا بس مثال على جاي لعندك إذا سمحتي، بس خليني أخذ الفيديو اللي بيجاوب الأستاذ عون على القسم الأول من السؤال. تفضل فيه كمثال على موضوع تأهيل البنى التحتية في مشروع الجزيرة. تفضلوا. طبعا هو مع وزارة الموارد المائية وبتمويل من اتحاد الأوروبي.
من المشاريع المهمة في ناحية ربيعة وفي محافظة نينوى، وكان هذا المشروع يعمل به آلاف العوائل قبل مجيء داعش وتحطيم أجزاء من هذا المشروع. تعرض مشروع الجزيرة الإروائي إلى تخريب ودمار نتيجة أعمال داعش الإرهابي، فتم تدمير الجسور وتخريب القنوات الرئيسية وقسم من القنوات الفرعية. وبعد تحرير ناحية ربيعة من قبل القوات الأمنية، قامت منظمة الفاو مشكورة بالاهتمام بهذا المشروع. أيضا لا يفوتنا أن نقدم شكرا الجزيل للاتحاد الأوروبي الذي مول قسم من أعمال إعادة تأهيل وترميم مشروع ري الجزيرة الإروائي.
وبذلك تم تشغيل المشروع عام 2019 هذا العام بمساحة تبلغ 100,000 دونم، وقد استفاد كل الفلاحين من تشغيل المشروع وكان محصولهم لهذا العام جيد. وكذلك قامت منظمة الفاو بتأهيل 7 جسور على المرحلة الأولى، وهي بصدد اليوم إحالة 6 جسور أخرى على المرحلة الثانية لتأهيل المرحلة الأولى. كذلك قامت منظمة الفاو بتأهيل محطة تل الهواء بأعمال مدنية، وسوف تقوم لاحقا بإعادة تأهيل الأمور الكهربائية والميكانيكية.
طبعا فادنا بكثير من الأمور مثل المحاصيل الزراعية، البطاطا والطماطة والحنطة والشعير وكثير من الأمور.
احنا نشكر منظمة الفاو بالعمل الدؤوب على إدامة مشروع ري الجزيرة، ونشكرهم على الجهود القيمة الذي قاموا بعمل العمال أهل القرى المنطقة الذي يمشي بها المشروع.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank all the speakers of the session for their valuable input, for the valuable information they shared in the session. And I also would like to thank Mr. Diab Abdullah for the information he also shared. It has always been quite useful for us. His technical expertise, the information he has shared has always been important for us. As mentioned by all the speakers, climate change is the major problem of the region. And I believe that all the countries in the region are facing the impacts of climate change drastically. And that's the main message of this session, I believe. So the solution would also come from climate change studies, and of course, through adaptation and mitigation. Another point raised by the speakers was joint assessment in transboundary basins. I think it was Carol from UNESCO.
Sorry to interrupt you. Could you please just introduce yourself?
Oh, okay, this is Burcu Çallı from Turkish Water Institute from Turkey. I think it was Carol from UNESCO who raised that issue, the issue of joint assessment in transboundary basins. Technically speaking, joint assessment, joint measurements are quite important. First, for calibration in transboundary basins in the studies among the riparians. And it is particularly important to take a realistic scientific picture of the issue and the basin. So I would like to highlight the importance of this message. And I believe that this might be a good starting point or a solution, even a solution for riparian states to work together for tackling the negative effects of the climate change in transboundary basins, so that it will enable the countries to see the scientific facts, what is going on in the basin regarding the effects of climate change, and it would enable all the countries to tackle with the fact of climate change in the region, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just highlight, I fully agree with what you mentioned. Let me highlight 2 points. One, that now there is, His Excellency has addressed the request, and it has been part of what has been agreed upon, that Iraq would be joining the Vapor remote sensing regional project, and the Iraq would be one of the 5 countries that would be joining this very important project, which will enable lots of information and data to be available on different levels. This is very important achievement. I think it has been done in the last few weeks, and that would be also something that the Netherlands has been supporting in it as well. The second point is related to climate change. Now, with the Ministry of Health and Environment, Water Resources and Agriculture, we are implementing a project in the south funded by Jeff for climate smart agriculture and mitigations for climate change. This is number one. Number two, we are also having this joint team from the three ministries with the Ministry of Planning to formulate a project for GCF that has been already accepted in terms of the concept node. Iraq needs lots of efforts in terms of climate change, especially in areas in the south, which has been greatly affected by the impact of climate change. And going back to what Mr. Aoun was mentioning, there are lots of potentials. We are making the joint efforts with the government to bring more examples about how to mitigate in terms of climate smart agriculture practices that I'm sure wouldn't be only an example, but also would be scaled up on the level of having these examples to be implemented on a wider range. Thank you very much for the question. إذا بعد في أي سؤال آخر بخدمتكم. إذا ما في أسئلة بشكركم مجددا، نعتذر لأنه السيشن كانت أطول بس كانت بعتقد مهمة. شكرا مع الوزير مع الوزراء أصحاب السعادة، شكرا جزيلا زملاء، يعطيكم ألف عافية. Thank you very much.